On top of Old Horror Hill, in a secret laboratory, Professor Weirdo and Count Kook were in their monstrous glory. 6 drops of the essence of terror.
Hello, welcome to TMR podcast number 5, brought to you by Integrated Nature and Zero Fluoride Water Filters. My name is Chris, this is Sunny, and this podcast will be talking about conspiracy and conspiracy theory.
Right, thank you, Chris. A successful introduction from pretty much the first day. Now, let's start off with some dictionary definitions. The first one is, a conspiracy in law is an agreement by 2 or more persons to commit crime, fraud, or another wrongful act. In that case, wrongful act is something generally nefarious. So every time you sit together with a mate that you do something that, may not be entirely ethical or legal, or it's technically a conspiracy, If you and another person decide to dump an old couch at the side of the road, you've conspired. So, firstly, I'd just like to say that it's not necessarily a heavily loaded term. A conspiracy is a lot of general things. Secondly, a conspiracy theory. This comes from the Wikipedia dictionary, and it says, a conspiracy theory is a hypothesis alleging that the members of a coordinated group are, or were, secretly working together to commit illegal or wrongful actions, including to hide the existence of the group and its activities. In notable cases, the hypothesis contradicts the mainstream explanation of historical or current events. Now, Chris, what I like about this definition is that it uses a very appropriate term, hypothesis. In scientific method, a hypothesis is when you have certain events that you've got to explain. You've sort of got to figure out, for example, let's say you're seeing explosions in the sky, which you're gonna, in, say, a different galaxy. The scientists are gonna get together and go, well, I think what's going on is that hydrogen clouds are being ignited by passing meteorites, and this is happening. So
we're talking about scientific method?
Yeah. Essentially, you're looking at something you don't quite understand, you have a lot of data points, and you're trying to connect them together.
A hypothesis.
Yeah, and then you say, well, I think this is what's going on. And the purpose of a hypothesis isn't that, you're going to claim it and then defend it. It's just your best explanation of something that's going on.
Based on data.
And you put it out there for people to say, well, does it hold up? And people see if more data can fit your hypothesis or if some data contradicts it. Now, if a solid piece of information totally contradicts your hypothesis, then you probably need a new hypothesis. And this is how science works. Now, in society, of course, when powerful people have a meeting, and after that meeting something happens, and if you say, well, they must have,
conspired.
They must have conspired to make that happen.
Well, we could give an example from one of our other podcasts, the light bulb conspiracy.
Yes, the Phoebus cartel. And, at the time, now the documents have come out some 50 years later, but at the time, if somebody saw these people, meeting in a hotel, and then after that, the light bulb quality is going down and the prices are going up.
The prices are set.
Yeah, the prices are set while the quality is actually going down. And someone just said, well, I think these people are setting the prices, He would have been a conspiracy theorist.
That's right.
He
would making a claim for putting a bit of evidence together.
He would have basically just been a guy making an informed guess, logically speculating. And, in society,
we do that every day.
Yeah. The guys that are on TV, that are interpreting the news, a bomb goes off in Boston, and some guy says, well, there's been a lot of chatter on the networks from, I don't know, Al-Shisha Taliban group or something.
No. It's just straight into Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, but the point is,
they're taking evidence from the past, models, whatever, and then they're coming forward and they're saying, this is what we believe based on this, and this.
Yeah, and that is precisely, that is conspiracy theory. Except when, say, you're saying something that contradicts the status quo or the media, the label on that independent person is being put conspiracy theorist, and if somebody's doing the similar type of speculation along the lines of what the mainstream institutions believe, It's expert analysis. So, firstly, I'd like to just
expert analysis, the news, is it?
Yeah. So
where'd you get that from?
But that, you have your terrorism experts. They come out.
Oh, yeah.
So when somebody working for the government, let's say some event goes down, and really, honestly, we have no idea what happened, right?
Well, I've seen this a lot.
Yeah. But let's say we don't know what happened. Forget it. It could be entirely, completely government non-involved or whatever. Like, we don't know what happened. Simply unknown, right? If Brzezinski goes on NBC and says that, I believe that it is this group from the Middle East and da-da-da-da-da, it is expert analysis. If Alex Jones goes on the radio and says, I believe it is factions within the U.S. government, they're both looking at the same evidence and speculating on it, but one guy is a conspiracy theorist because his speculation involves powerful institutions that run the country, and the other guy
I think one's speaking outside the box, looking at it from all views, right? Not to say that all those views are right or wrong. And then you have another one who has a line he has to toe. Like he can't. He's scripted in a way. I mean, based on evidence of past and in history, he's going to just start laying out without all the evidence. He's laying out his theory based on what he's allowed to say and what he's not allowed to say.
I wouldn't say allowed or not allowed, but basically somebody coming in from mainstream institutions is not going to accuse mainstream institutions almost never unless the evidence is so bulletproof. In that case, he won't say anything.
I can give you an example. I was watching the local news here in Australia just after the Boston bombings, and this was first thing in the morning. All we knew is a bomb went off. We only thought it was one. We didn't know it was two at that time. And straight away, and our morning news in this country is entertainment news. Like it's all celebrity gossip and weather and sport, right? So, and the first thing he says is, now, naturally, you think, it'll be Al-Qaeda. I mean, everyone's blaming Al-Qaeda for everything. They do it. They're amazing. There's this, supernatural force straight out of a comic book. They're everywhere, like the Russians were back in the 60s. But anyway, so, he comes straight on. He says, now, but this is with no evidence whatsoever, only that a bomb's gone off at Boston. I believe it's from a couple of these internal right-wing groups. Wow. And I thought, man, geez, did he pull that out of a box? Is this scripted? Did someone write that down for him? I mean, and he didn't even base it on any evidence whatsoever. He just comes straight out and said it. And I thought, that's amazing. Because...
But no, Chris, let's leave it at that as an example of a conspiracy theory. And the question is there an agenda? But, I'd like to, after sort of giving examples of A, that it's a hypothesis, and B, that we hypothesize all the time. And this is, you need to hypothesize to understand something that's going on. If you see unexplained events, you need a theory first, and then to see if the facts within those events match your theory. Yes. And if they do, well, you're probably right. You don't know. You may not ever have enough evidence for 100%, but, I mean, if your theory...
You'll never have enough evidence.
...incorporates everything that happened in a logical way...
But the more evidence you get, the more...
It becomes very likely. Now, just like a historical perspective on, say, conspiracies and conspiracy theories. I mean, I just wrote a couple of things there on the board. Caesars. There was a TV show called Rome, and I mean, a lot of big Hollywood movies made up about, Julius Caesar, Augustus, Nero, Caligula. Looking through Roman history, it is just rich, powerful families who are in the Senate scheming against each other, to take control of the armies, to take control of the empire. And this is like a never-ending... It's not even a conspiracy theory. It's never-ending series of conspiracies where groups of powerful people...
You think that goes on today, Sonny?
Let me give you another example.
Not if I'm watching our local news, it doesn't go on.
I don't know if any of the audience, please let us know if you watch The Borgias. The Borgias is a show on Showtime. It is about Pope Alexander and this Borgia family that came from Spain. I think they had 3 popes in total.
What year does this start at?
I think it's 15 or 1600s, and this is in Rome. And it is, again, like a repetition of the whole Caesars thing. It's powerful families, like the Pope, who's meant to be God's emissary on earth, the most pious person. He's got 3 kids. His kids are marrying queens and kings. He's like, he's got 5 lovers, and
that doesn't sound right.
And he's aligning himself with all these monarchs against these monarchs. I mean, these are historical facts. Again, a series of conspiracies, and just in modern times, I'll give you 2 examples from the States. For example, 2 things that you had the alternative media. You had people saying this is what the government is doing, and everybody was going like, you're nuts. Like, where do you get these ideas from? One was the Tuskegee study, where something like 400 black men were purposefully infected and not left untreated with syphilis.
Yep. So
they could see how the disease spreads and
how
long they're going to take to live. Again, documents for this were released on public record through,
How many years later, Sonny?
I don't know. I think the first time they started reporting the Tuskegee study was in the 90s. And
this was done back in the 60s.
This was done like 30s and 40s. I have like
okay, that far back.
Yeah, I had it written on a handout, but here it is. The Tuskegee study. Actually, I've got the years when it was done. Wow. 1932 to 1972. So you can just imagine, like, these people were literally dying of syphilis, and they were following them around, not treating them, just to see, like, what happens. And they infected, like, thousands of other people. This is insane. This actually happened.
I don't believe that's true. I believe that's a conspiracy theory.
And it was until the documents showed up. Yeah, and another one would be the paperclip, Operation Paperclip.
How come I never saw this on the news, Sonny?
Well, you could. There is documentaries about it, but no, it won't. It probably won't make any of you.
But I didn't see this when I was watching my music television.
Well, let's talk about another one. Then this is funny. If anyone's watched that movie, Doctor Strangelove, have you seen Doctor Strangelove?
Yeah.
And Doctor Strangelove is the my president. Well, it was basically, it was Kubrick saying in the 60s, and this came out again in the 80s. This came out like 40 years after the fact. It was Alan Dulles. He was meeting this guy called Reinhard Gehlen, or I don't know how to pronounce the surname. Essentially, the head spy in the States, meaning the head spy in Germany, saying, well, I know you guys are all war criminals, but you have all this information on the Russians, so how about we fly all of you over to America and you'll work for us? So they did that with the spies and the scientists. And some of these scientists were absolute monster war criminals that did hundreds of experiments on Jews in concentration camps. And, experiments till people die, like human experimentation.
And none of them being brought up in front of one of those Jewish war criminal trials?
No, they didn't make it.
Funny that.
They didn't make it. And some of them actually became famous. Well, like Werner von Braun became the head of aeroengineering and in NASA.
Well, we heard a lot about Werner von Braun and his thoughts on the white race and.
Yeah, so like these war criminal Nazi racist psychotic murderers.
Are they still running America today? Are they, Sonny?
Well,
or their children are.
Yeah, I'm sure that they're. I haven't traced this, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. So these are some examples for people like from distant history and from recent history that powerful people do conspire to do some ridiculously unethical things. And you don't hear about it. It doesn't get reported in the media. And
about 30 years later, and everyone's
people were talking about Operation Paperclip, even naming it. I mean, Kubrick knew it in the 60s, and yet you would have been called a nutter for saying these things.
Well, this is the whole thing with this conspiracy theory. I mean, like it says, like it's shown here on the board, if you bring up a topic with another person, right, and he has no input or no knowledge of the subject that you're talking about. But not only that, it's so far out of his thought pattern. Like, it's just so opposite to what he thinks the world really is. Like, if we bring up the topic of aliens, right, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Whether they're real or not real, right? But if we bring up straight away, he totally disregards it because that's the status quo. I mean,
That's true.
he's falling in line with the status quo because he doesn't want to look silly, but he can't comment on it because he doesn't know, but he will not. He's uninformed, but he won't even research the fact.
No, there is a gap there. Now, Chris, we're actually working on our board from top right.
Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead.
You did, but we are going to look into the alien thing. I mean,
I'm not saying alien. I'll just use that as an example. But what I'm getting to is that when we find a subject I find with a lot of people don't like negative stuff, right? I don't really want to hear that. Then I have to do something about it, or maybe I have to think about it for another 2 minutes before something else comes up. But I like the idea how people they blow it off. And straight away they throw it straight in the bin, because I call it the bin conspiracy theory, because it goes straight in the bin of conspiracy theory because they just don't want to even entertain the idea.
But wait for it. They're going to do that if you tell them even something factual, like say, oh, look, the government used depleted uranium in Iraq. They use it in Bosnia. They use it in Sarajevo.
And now we've got birth defects.
And, I may tell them like a fact that I've actually seen with my own eyes in a lot of conspiracy theory. But they'll actually do that with the most commonsensical thing. I mean, I want to talk about two things. Like, firstly, economic incentives, right? Now, what is an economic incentive? Let's say in Australia here, the government doesn't think we have enough people. We want more population. So what they're going to do is they're going to have this thing called a baby bonus. And if you have a baby, they'll give you $5,000. So there is a $5,000 incentive to have a baby. And guess what? Hundreds of thousands of more babies are born in the years when we have a baby bonus. When people have a reason, an incentive to do an action because they'll get a financial reward, they generally do it. All right, good. Now, when we say the petrol companies have an incentive to supply less petrol, to say lower the refining capacity because it's going to bring them more money because it's going to drive the price up, then you are, I don't know, man, like
That's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy talk, and I won't hear of it.
But that very same logic that the government uses for baby bonus is just like a normal part of everyday life.
Well, we know for a fact that the what do you call it? The oil cabal, what do they call themselves up there in
the Five Sisters or whatever?
Why didn't it come to me?
OPEC.
OPEC, where they get together and they say we need to reduce, because we're not getting enough for our oil, we need to reduce supply, right? And then we get our price of our oil up. And they do that all the time. And then you're constantly hearing about how America goes, oh, look, you've reduced it too much, blah, 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 there's a huge demand. But here on the other side, you've got the petrochemical companies shutting down refineries, haven't built a new one in years, and they're trying to tell you there's no money in petroleum products.
And the irony is, of course, they're trying to get as much territory, so they're exploring oil like crazy and then not refining it. But let's move on from the oil. I mean, we've illustrated the economic incentives. Now, the aligned interests. You see, powerful people. Let's say, I don't know, you're one of the people that owns or runs one of the big arms manufacturers. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, BAE Systems. You are interested in selling this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Money and war.
Now, politician in America is interested in having BAE Systems, Boeing, Lockheed Martin to come to his state where they're going to spend a lot of money, employ a lot of people. But to do that, they both need to either have a war or a danger of war that's going to justify the country buying weapons. Now, see, this is a huge financial incentive for both politicians and states, and the people that own these companies to drum up fear. Now you may say maybe not real war, but again.
But let's look outside of that, and let's say that I can't name the event because I don't have the information on me right now. But we know in the past that these companies, these big companies, have armed both sides or supplied arms to one side to overthrow a government, and then supply weapons to the government to try and take back the other side, just so they can make sales.
Yeah.
Now, we've seen
the
this.
Iraq-Iran war was an example where actually America was involved in supplying both sides of weapons.
Yeah, but this goes way back. This goes back into the days of the American Civil War. You know,
I didn't actually know that.
where
No.
they were pushing their arms through the Russians. The Russians were bringing in ships to supply the Confederates. I think I'm going back a while, but yeah, I mean this has been played out for years and years and years. And these companies that manufacture ships, anything to do with the war machine, right? They're supplying both sides.
Well, in Europe, right before the Napoleonic Wars, when you had, France, Britain, Prussia, Austria-Hungary, there were several wars where the Rothschild family was loaning money to both sides in the war.
Well, Rothschilds were. Well, I know
Rothschilds.
Rothschilds were lending money to the Bluecoats when they were fighting the Greycoats in the Civil War. The Rothschilds were back in the other side, and the Russians were back in the Southerners.
Well, I mean, there you go. Like, let's just sort of elaborate on this notion. Okay, economic incentives. We've already had this wonderful example of the baby bonus, and see that kind of works. You could say economic incentive when the government gives you an incentive to lease a car. I mean, at one stage you told me that you would have never leased a freaking BMW, but it was virtually a tax write-off. You didn't have to pay a cent for it. So all of a sudden, when you have a big financial incentive to do an action, you do it.
Yeah.
And also these people with power, there are a great many. We think that we elect politicians and they act in our interest for us, but what really happens is that there are people that own multi-billion-dollar corporations, the people that run them. They have a huge interest in how the government acts, and the governments themselves, perhaps to defend them a little bit, their economies and their success in the international marketplace depends on having productive relationships with these companies.
No, our government runs on growth, right?
Yeah.
We've got to have economic growth. Now, we can talk here about economic incentives, but that's all governments. There's not one government on the planet that talks about no growth.
But let's talk about a few examples. I don't know what are like big companies that work in Toyota, Ford, whatever. We make a bunch of cars here. Okay, just as an example, the government really loves to have them here because we get to make some cars, we get some jobs,
we get to hear about jobs,
we get to tax them, we get some of their money, right?
Yep.
But in order to do that, maybe the only way to get it done is for them to get in a room and make some backroom deal where they give them special favors, and otherwise they're going to go to China or somewhere else where they are going to get those special favors.
We've already got that right now here in Melbourne. I mean, we're here in Australia and we've got Ford that are just about ready to walk out the door. Toyota's talking to leave because our dollar's so high. And our manufacturing, our wages are high. We've got all our OH&S environmental stuff. So the government's throwing money at these car companies that they know are going to leave the country in the next 5 years.
But here's the thing: we're not telling the people out there that the politicians and the businessmen are sitting in some back room scheming against your interests. No, what we're telling you,
they get to buy more democracy because they got more money.
Well, yeah, what we're telling you is that the system is set up that way that it will happen inevitably. It can't not happen. And where you have is these think tanks. You have, say, in America, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and internationally there's the Bilderberg Group. In UK, you have the Chatham House. You have the Brookings Institution. This is places where people that are advising sort of the heads of state, people that actually run the country, meet together with the richest, most powerful people who run the corporations.
And these are lobbyists too. They'll lobby.
And you know what? They have aligned interests. You can read mainstream books like this guy called David Rothkopf. He wrote a book called Superclass. It's simply about the richest 5,000 people in the world. And what when they get together, what do they want? They own the biggest corporations. They want free trade, no restrictions on what they can import, export. They want super low taxes. They want legal exemptions from, pollution, everything.
Yeah.
So, they tax incentives, free land grants, what their interests are, whether, let's say, you are a weapons manufacturer and a mining company, you can sit down together and work out a relationship that suits you both with some third world nation.
Henry Ford did when he took over the mines that used to mine the steel, and he took over the railway that used to supply the raw material to his factories. He tried to buy them all out. He got caught out in it. That's called a monopoly.
But you see, him and the guys that he was buying out, probably a mutual interest, the guys was sitting there thinking, well, I'm never going to get offered this money, and this guy wants to own the infrastructure, and he's willing to pay me, 50% more than the infrastructure is worth. So here you go, Henry Ford. The point I guess I'm making out there is that powerful people have their interests aligned, and their interests are not aligned with our interests. Their interests are, it's like teachers. When you see a teachers union, you go, well, of course, they all want the same things. They get together and then they lobby the government. Well, the same thing happens out there for the billionaires. There's a billionaires union, and guess what? They are about 5,000 times more powerful than the teachers union or the Australian manufacturing workers union.
Does that mean I get the same time with my politician as these billionaires?
Of course not.
Why not?
But I'm trying to explain how it's a very rational, organic, natural thing that develops within this present capitalist geopolitical system. And because these people, their resources are so huge and they're pooled together and they're all pulling in the same direction, they all go to the same social clubs, they meet several times a year and exchange ideas, they come to a consensus. Mm-hmm. If you hear reports from what even they openly talk about, what happens at these meetings, it's not that we sit around, we, try to screw everyone out of their money. That's a side effect of what they do. They try to come to a consensus and all be doing the same thing, be pulling in the same direction.
Well, they don't. Yeah. Well, I mean, if it doesn't matter whether you're a billionaire or trillionaire. If you're trying to pull in one different direction, everyone else is lined up against you.
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't matter how rich you are. I mean, even if you're freaking Richard Branson, and if you want to do something that is opposed to Google, Microsoft, Boeing, and all of them, you're going to get fried alive in today's marketplace.
They'll figure out a way to fry you.
And so what we're trying to say that the net result is all the rich and powerful people getting together and generally working out some solution that works out for them. Whatever works out for them does not work out for the average person. Whatever works out for them generally works out for us in a way that, we work longer hours for less pay, with less rights and less benefits and freaking less say in a political system. Mm. And this isn't conspiracy theory. This is how the world works. And this is what we wanted to explain to you. And I think, this pretty much concludes the first part of the podcast, which would be a critical analysis, applying a little bit of critical thinking aid to the definition of the word conspiracy theory and the reality of the conspiracies, which aren't really conspiracies. You could call it networking, consensus finding among the most rich and the powerful people. You don't have to use a big word. And this, what we're saying, is a scientific hypothesis with abundant evidence. Everything I said here, I could back up with more factual documentation from university and mainstream sources.
Well, we also know that when a company can't get their way and they can't financially cripple a country, they get the politicians to send the army in, the army of the country that they want to send in, to overthrow the government and bring in someone more favourable. And we see this happen all the time in South America.
John Perkins.
We can give examples. We can give examples of the what was that, fruit company?
I think it was the United Fruit Company in it was somewhere in the Caribbean.
Yeah, and they had to send in one of the American generals over there to sort it out.
Smedley Butler.
That's right. And this is all historic fact. It's not conspiracy theory where a company used...
He wrote a book about it. He was one of the most decorated generals in the history of the American Marine Corps. And the guy war is a racket, he called it. And he essentially said, yeah, I was like a gangster enforcer for the corporate interest in America.
And
look up Smedley Butler.
That was back in the
30s,
30s.
Yeah.
And this still goes on today. And if you don't believe this goes on, just look into it a little bit more, because we can see examples of this going on, but we probably won't find out all the truth until the next 20, 30 years down the track.
Chris, like, I think we did the first part quite well. We've established this, but let's look at the kind of like loonier, wackier side. Okay, like, the world is not what you think it is. Powerful people do collude and with their aligned interest to screw you. But that, after you realize this truth, what happens to a lot of people is they develop a certain level of paranoia about everything that happens in the world. Everything is government conspiring against them, and they don't. The critical thinking they've managed to apply to what the official sources are telling them. They don't apply to what the unofficial sources are telling them. And we have, I know so many actual intelligent people that are out there thinking that, you know, lizard people, entities are, you know, shining things from the moon to limit our perception, or, you know, you have a very mainline, say, Christian, and, you know, a lot of this knowledge that we talked about, mechanics of how these people collude, we, unfortunately, in my view, owe to a lot of strong Christian evangelical sources. I mean, we're, you know, Catherine Albrecht, for example, Privacy, Alex Jones, Stanley Monteith, Edward G. Griffin. So many of these people are seeing this in a context of, you know, this is the biblical end times, and Satan is here. And perhaps, like, the worst example, even though he doesn't bring his religion into it so much, of this is, I'd say, Alex Jones. And I'd probably think 90% of our audience knows who Alex Jones is. Because I want to break this down. Like, he has some of the best factual analysis of what goes on in the world, or what's behind the scenes. He brings on the best experts.
Hey, don't get me wrong, he interviews some great people, and he asks some great questions, but he over-exaggerates.
Firstly, the over-exaggeration, but worse than that, here's the fall. When you listen to him, you get this idea that, no, these people are so big, so powerful, and you're so small and so powerless. And then the ads come on, and then you know, well, buy the dry food for your family, you know, buy a fucking shelter, you know, bury yourself on the ground, get weapons. Gold and silver.
Guns, gold, and lead or something.
The whole thing is, I'm thinking of, like, what is the end product of actually getting your information about what's going on in the world through Alex Jones? You're going to build a bunker. You're going to turn your house into a hole in the ground, you know, with 10 years worth of stored food. You'll be pointing out of it with your fully automatic, you know, AR-17 rifle.
I feel sorry for the postman looking for your address.
Because, I mean, even though these things are happening, you've got to realize that the people doing it, they are sitting on it kind of like by the edge of their seat of their pants. Like, this whole thing depends on hundreds of millions of people being absolutely and totally conned. And the thing about a con is you have to keep conning. It's like you tell a lie, right? You gotta tell like 10 other lies to cover the first one, and after you told 10 more, you gotta keep them covering. And
well, one of the things I find with Alex Jones is that when he makes a statement, right, a fact, and somewhat, it might be a real fact, it might be bullshit, I don't know. And he comes out with this fact and he says, "This is what I believe, this is it," right? If something comes out that challenges that, and it might prove down the track that it is the real fact, and what he was pushing before was false, he still stands by the falsehood because he doesn't want to look like he's silly, you know. And he stood by that, and that's the problem, because he's not telling his audience to think it out for themselves. What he's doing is he's making these statements. He's doing the thinking for them.
Yeah, he is doing the thinking for them. You don't actually listen, Alex. Actually, I'd say he's improved recently, and funnily enough, after criticizing him so much, I'll say I do listen to him probably a couple of times a week, and I'll give him a few compliments. He's actually improved in a way that he says, okay, these are the facts, and he refrains from instantly going, this is what happened, they did it, they said this and that. Like, he actually, now the distance between an event and Alex Jones claiming that he knows the truth and telling you exactly what happened has actually expanded a little bit. So he rushes to conclusions less than he used to, but, and he actually, I'll tell you one beautiful quote from him. He's like, you're a conspiracy theorist if you don't believe known liars. And that's pretty, like, if you think about it, say, like, U.S. military, like Bin Laden death, right? I mean, the same military that lied to you more times than you can count. They did the Tuskegee experiments, for example. Then they grew the opium and they didn't tell anybody. Then they staged an event to start the Vietnam War that came
Gulf
out.
of Tonkin.
Then they faked the intelligence to invade Iraq, the weapons of mass destruction.
No lies,
Then what was it? Was it Jessica Lynch that got saved? They made up a story about her being a hero for the media. So there's this group of people. I mean,
I did not have sexual relations with that.
I'm talking about the U.S. military.
Oh, sorry.
This group of freaking people, right? That have this comic barrage of making shit up all the time, right? If they say, oh, we got Bin Laden, he's dead. We don't have the body or pictures or video or anything.
It's a picture of him inside an ice cube.
No, but, like, just think about it. This group of people that's lied on record, like, tens of times, embarrassingly, tell you, we got this guy and we have no evidence. And if you don't believe that, if for some reason, like, you don't believe that, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're nuts.
Oh,
like,
I hate that.
It's just like some friend of yours, Jimmy, saying he beat up, 300 people over the weekend. And you know that he lies all the time, and he tells you, and, like, you don't believe him, and and then people think you're nuts because you don't believe Jimmy.
Well, the funny thing too is once they use that word conspiracy theory, and this goes on a lot, even when you watch the media, as soon as something falls into that bracket, everyone laughs.
Yeah.
Because you're an idiot. You're an idiot.
It's a conversation. It's a conversation stopper. Because
you're an idiot for even thinking that. Now, why should people be treated as idiots because they have a different way of a different approach, or they may be looking outside the box, they may be looking at other evidence, but as soon as someone goes, that's all conspiracy theory, you straight away people are laughing at you because you're not the status quo. You're
I think you've got to realize though, when you've got to stop people. If somebody says, that is a conspiracy theory, I mean, you've just got to stop the conversation right there, and you just got to say, well, excuse me. Let's break that word down. What's a conspiracy theory? It is a hypothesis for an event that happened. What do you do with the hypothesis? You find contradicting evidence. Now, please, I've just said something rather than...
Do you know what I say?
If you're calling it a theory, what people do to theories is they try to give me contradicting evidence. Do you have any?
Yeah, well, see, that's what I say. I say, based on what? Based on what? Why? Based on what? What can you tell me?
What do you believe? What do you believe? And you can just say, well, by the same rationale, what you believe is a conspiracy theory as well. Because, see, you have...
But wait a minute, Sonny. Everyone believes what I believe.
Aha! You're a conspiracy theory.
Because that's what the government told me.
Well,
they told me that.
You believe in a particularly popular conspiracy. I mean, you could just say...
I want to be popular.
Yeah. Have you watched that 5-minute 9/11 conspiracy theory video by James Corbett? I'm sure you have. I'll tell you what,
probably.
guys. We'll chuck it in at the end. We always throw in things at the end of the podcast, but it's just a classical thing, though. I mean, I'm not gonna claim I know what happened in 9/11 or who did it. It's a long rabbit hole that I don't.
Well, I just think there's a lot. Give me a second. Can I just one word? I think it's been 10 years. There's a lot of evidence that's come out in 10 years, and yet they still won't go back to it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what we know. Like we know that the narrative of these terrorists hate us for our way of life, so they like flew these planes into these buildings, which then collapsed, and that's it. Like,
Yeah, but wait a minute. Before that happened, when they were training to fly the planes down in Florida, they were heading to strip clubs and gambling and drinking and doing all the things that they hate about Western society.
But you could laugh. I mean, I don't want to spend 10 minutes on 9/11. I want to, close it down in about 3, and I'll just say, talk about conspiracy theories. The Pentagon, very interesting thing. September 10th, they're going, we can't seem to find 2.3 trillion. We're going to do this war on bureaucracy, and we got these people looking for it. And guess what? Like, the only people that really died in the Pentagon, the place where that plane hit, were the people looking for the missing 2.3 trillion. And
do you know where the rest of the information was? In Building 7. The building that mysteriously fell down with no plane to hit it.
Again, I don't know. Like, these terrorists must have really been.
Maybe they took that 2.3 trillion.
Yeah, I don't know. But the point is, it's patently ridiculous. What the government has actually told people about it is patently ridiculous. And
well,
you can only call it a conspiracy theory because at so many levels, it has explanations that don't add up.
Here's something I do know, right? I do know that they spent 3 times more investigating whether Bill Clinton had sex with all these women, Monica Lewinsky and so on and so forth, right? They spent 3 times more on that than what they did on the 9/11 hearing and investigation. Now that, tell me, is that either because that you spend less money, then there's less investigation, and you don't get the results? I mean, let's face it.
Clearly, they were not really interested in getting to the bottom of what really happened. And
that's a perfect example.
Speaks for itself. That speaks for itself.
But the other thing...
14 million, by the way, Chris. Think about it. 14 million. Okay, this crime, the war in Iraq cost like 2 trillion. Okay?
This is a world changer.
This is a world changer. Like, they spent... It's... Just imagine, like... I tell you... Chris, there is a mountain of gold in Alaska, and you spent 1 minute investigating it before you get your entire family and spend your whole life savings to go to Alaska after you've done one Google search. It makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, they spent $3 million.
Is there gold there? Maybe those Eskimos have weapons of mass destruction. We better go there and find out.
But I'm trying to paint this picture.
No,
like what your argument.
I'm trying to make it.
Your argument is so valid because it's like the biggest crime, the biggest event in our lifetimes. They spend so little resources on investigating it that in itself, we don't even have to go into any detail of 9/11. We'll just end it there. Is that they spend so little resources investigating it. The only thing you can conclude is they weren't really interested in finding out what happened.
They already knew what they were going to do in the first place. They already knew. They already knew where to go. They knew where the terrorists were.
Yeah.
Those Eskimos, they got spears. They're weapons of mass destruction. We kill a lot of seals with those spears.
And I don't know, like, what else?
They're nomadic. They're always on the move too.
We covered
definitely terrorists.
We covered the conversation stopper aspect and the status quo worldview, the absence of critical thinking. I mean, what else other than,
aliens.
Aliens. Yeah, aliens. Freaking, I don't know, Chris and I differ in this to an extent, but you see.
No, I think there's one part of it we can agree on.
Yeah, there is.
Physics.
Let's talk about freaking, UFOs for a minute. All right. Now, literally, I would probably say thousands of observed, noted phenomena by pilots, radar operators in the sky of objects that defy the presently understood laws, not laws of physics necessarily, but the G-forces that, people would have to fly in. I don't know, like things that are obviously way outside of anything possible. Now, thousands. Here's the first aspect of this argument. All right? Anybody looking into this for 20 minutes can confirm what I just said. If you talk about it, even that there are things in the sky that cannot be explained, you are a bit nuts. You're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, but wait a minute. If you watch the news, right, or you watch any show, and they get someone on there who said, I saw something speeding through the sky. It looked like it was going twice as fast as anything I've ever seen, and then it stopped and went in the opposite direction at the same speed, right? So number one, I can't explain it with my maths because, as far as I know, something can't travel at 40,000 miles an hour and just do a reverse in the same direction and travel 40,000 miles an hour unless whatever was inside would be crushed, right? So naturally, I'm thinking that can't be anything that I'm aware of, right? So it's a UFO. It's an unidentified flying object, right? That's all he's saying. He's not saying he got anal probed by a little green man with antennas coming out of his head. But when you watch this on the news, the first reaction, and I don't know whether this is being taught to us, this is something in our subconscious, this is something that they always laugh straight away. Oh, UFOs, let's laugh. It's so funny. Right now, I think it's funny too, but I can't explain the physics.
Yeah. But here's the beautiful freaking thing, right? Okay, you got these things in the sky. You could talk about it rationally. We just mostly did. There's things in the sky you can't explain. What's the logical thing? What would a scientist do? We're going to formulate a few hypotheses, right? And we're going to see if any of them check out. Now, this is where this issue is. Either you dismiss everything, it's conspiracy theory, forget about it. Or, it's like you shut down instantly. Or there's people that go like, ooh, it's our brothers from space. Now, to my knowledge, I don't know. There isn't a video of an alien or actual pictures of freaking green men. Or there are people that have these psychological encounters. I don't want to necessarily dismiss it, but there's so many people that believe in aliens. Literally, there are millions of people in the world living that believe that, I don't know whether they're green, blue, yellow, or whatever color, or what size or proportion, but they believe in extraterrestrials. And I think, again, you have a real phenomenon that's not acknowledged, and because you're not really thinking critically about, okay, what do I know? What are the facts? How do I logically connect them? The logical connections don't happen, and people just extrapolate, okay, it's the Space Brothers. In the meantime, there's a talk, and I'm going to put it in the links I got to. It's by a guy called Dave Emery, and I found it like this is the most fascinating talk I ever heard on UFOs. He literally just went through documented evidence of what the Germans had in World War II. And they had glowing little spears. They actually had flying saucers. Germans had. They weren't too fancy. They carried no weapons because the thing was spinning. They could just glow and fly in the sky and do weird things.
Well, I can even add to this because we know after the war, in 1947, 46, 47, we know down in Brazil that the US Air Force was flying disc-shaped objects with no wings. They were parking them when they landed. They didn't land on a runway. They didn't land. They had to land on a platform. Right? And when they flew in formation. Now, if you're a little green men from outer space, you wouldn't be flying in Air Force formations that we have here on Earth, right? Yeah. But in Brazil, there was plenty of people, and they're still around today, that can honestly say, we saw the insignias on the side of these craft. We saw the Air Force we saw them on base in Brazil. We saw them flying them in formation over the capital, right? In and out. And then when we moved into the 50s, these bases were shut down and we no longer saw it. So just after the war, we saw. Well, we have. And
the Americans imported all the German technology through paperclip. And I mean, there's reports called Foo Fighters, and I don't understand the mechanics of it. I heard about it in the talk, and they literally had these things that would, I don't know, they would appear to be balls of light. They were relatively small, flying saucer type, so that there was a spinning bit of metal. The air, which the principal way that air resists is that as you move through space, it compacts around at a much higher pressure in areas.
It's compressing.
It's compressing in the areas towards which you're traveling. So just imagine like super high air pressure pushing you back. It essentially it was like a big suction on both up and down. So all the air that was normally pushing, providing the resistance, was actually getting sucked into the craft and pushed out in the other direction. And that's supposedly how it worked, and it created weird light effects. I don't know exactly what the hell they were, but what is pretty clear, and I think people should just listen to the talk. It is,
You've also got to understand.
It's 2.5 hours long, but the guy really cites a lot of primary source material. But nonetheless,
yeah, but you've also got to understand when the war was on and these Foo Fighters appeared, there were a lot of planes in the air for a lot of hours. Like there was, and we're talking qualified pilots, so they can tell the difference between a German Messerschmitt and a Spitfire and a Mustang. They know all the different planes. So what they were seeing was stuff that would just defy any physics or any engineering of the day. They couldn't explain it. The way these things moved, the speed they moved, the direction they changed. So...
Well, my hypothesis on it is we showed when we talked about, I think in our patents, we showed people the SR-71, a plane that was developed in the 50s, and that looks like space-age stuff. And compare
looks more high-tech than the space shuttle.
Yeah, it looks more high-tech, and that was developed in the 50s. Like, military has cutting-edge technologies, and if you're going to put a hypothesis to the UFO, it's got to be the most logical thing that anybody could say. I mean, compare that to beings, first of all, life on other planets, being intelligent, secondly, coming here of all places. I mean, universe is so big and huge. Thirdly, coming here in like ships. Surely, you'd be able to, if you're putting technology millions of years ahead, there'd be some type of teleportation.
Wait a minute, you're basing that on our technology.
Yeah. But again, forget about what I said about aliens. But all I'm trying to explain is that the most likely hypothesis for this whole thing is that the propulsion systems, which seem to, in our mainstream society, have remained stagnant since the 50s, because that's when they had the jet engine.
Yes.
And we still use the jet engine. Clearly,
we're still using the combustion engine in our cars.
Someone somewhere, probably in the US, 99% more likely than anywhere else, moved well past the jet engine, and they're flying stuff that's flying on mechanical principles that we got no idea what they are, and that's what I think.
Yeah, but look, most people know how to use a computer, right?
Yeah.
But if you asked them, what's inside that box and how does it work? 90% of them wouldn't be able to tell you.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be able to tell you how that screen works, how that image is there, how it gets that information. They might even give you a basic, but 90% of the people couldn't tell you. They know how to use it, they just don't know what's inside of it. Now, I always look at the whole UFO thing and the universe thing. We know how far out, we can see only a certain distance out with optical telescopes, right?
Yeah.
Now, when I was in the US, I was at Cape Canaveral, and there was this little model.
Nice.
I've been there. And they had this little model, and they showed Earth, and they showed how far an optical telescope, and this was the best optical telescope we got's the one floating in space.
Hubble.
The Hubble, right? So they showed us how far in distance from the Earth it can see, right? Yeah, it looks pretty impressive, I suppose. And then they show you the other telescope, the radio waves, right?
Yeah.
Shows you how far they can go, and that's huge. It's like I don't know, 8 times, maybe more. I don't know, a lot further out, right? Anyway, then it showed you our Milky Way, and then it showed you outside our Milky Way, and it showed you further and further and further. And I mean, it's ridiculous to believe that where we are right now, that we haven't been past our moon. We've sent a few things to Mars, a few robots to walk around, and yet, with a little bit of evidence that we've got, we're just dismissing that the rest of the universe is lifeless, and we couldn't even grow bacteria on another planet, let alone life forms. Now, so to me, the whole argument, anyone who says, no, there's just us, we're the most smartest people on the planet, they're flat earthers, mate. There's still people that believe in the flat earth.
My answer to that is, I'm much on the same page. I think the likelihood of intelligent life elsewhere in the universe is, 99.9%, something like that. Given there's trillions and trillions, there'd probably be trillions of planets with similar configuration as Earth.
But it wouldn't have to be like Earth. It could be, we already know.
It could be anything.
We already know on Earth now, and we've only found this out in the last couple of years, that we've found a silicon-based life form here on this planet, right? Now, that's the first one we've ever found. So now we know that life can exist in silicon.
Dude, we could have life forms that are kilometers across, and
now, all right. So let's just take an example, and let's say that there's a race just like us humans, and they're living on, I don't know, let's say they're living on Mars, right? But let's just say they're 500 years more advanced than we are. Let's say they're 1,000 years more advanced than we are. Now, they could probably interact with us, but like we interact with animals on our planet, we study them, we watch them. We understand what they're about, right? So why would they want to interfere with us?
See,
I always find that very interesting when people say, well, if they're there, why don't they show themselves?
No, but I don't know. I'm looking. I'm listening to what you're saying, and here's sort of where we talked about, like, what we know. We could speculate about what aliens would be like, or if they exist or not, and what would the interaction be like, and that's a conversation worth having. But purely, I don't want to say, at least I've really, really looked into it. I looked for the evidence of alien visitation, and I'd like people to post some links in the comments.
I love it.
But I haven't seen anything that convinces me. Now, there's a bunch of historical stuff with funky little pictures, but, we have millions of Star Wars toys. It doesn't mean that the characters from Star Wars exist or that Jabba the Hutt is real.
I'm talking about movies.
No. What I mean is each culture develops a mysticism, a myth, and it usually, every culture on Earth has gods or supernatural creatures. Mm-hmm. Why can't you just invent a story that they came and visited us? Of course
but
you
most stories are based on fact. Most stories, all right, let's say, all right, I can understand some stories aren't based on fact. The point is that they couldn't explain it. They saw something they couldn't explain, so they made up a story that would fit. You know what I mean? Like the Greek, I don't know, I don't even know if I should go there, but if you're talking about a god, right? Now let's just say, if we went to a tribe in Papua New Guinea that never met Western society, and I stand there with my finger and I make a flicker lighter, I know the physics behind it, I know how it works, right? He has no idea. All he sees is flame come out of my hand. Now he knows how hard it is to make flame because he has to smash a couple of rocks together, smash some wood down on the ground. He's got no concept of even what he's doing to get flame. He has got no concept of the physics behind it, right? But all he sees is flame come out of my hand anytime I want it. So to him, that's some sort of godly magic, I suppose, in a way. And it's the same as when when the Europeans first went to America, when the Indians had no written language, right? If I had a guide who could speak, I don't know, one of the Indian languages, let's say the Mohicans or whatever they are, I don't know. I don't know much about American Indians. But if they've got no speaking language, right? So he tells him about his family. He tells the interpreter about his family, right? Tells him all about it. The interpreter writes it all down in English. He gives it to me, and he says to the guy, that guy knows everything about your family. Now, he might have seen that paper come across. He doesn't understand what's on it. Then he says, your sister's name is Jenny. She lives in a tree. Your brother is a hunter. He goes straight away, how does he know all this?
He must be,
He must be a god. Do you understand? So
no, you're right.
You've got to think about it from those people's point of view, and it's the same with us. If we had another similar.
No, but Chris, hold on. I'll buy into everything you've said, right?
Oh.
What's to say that? We know Vikings traveled far across. We have. I
think we've been really lied to about our history. Really.
I to a large extent, I agree with that, but the more advanced civilizations in history, if the ancient Egyptians their boats, their mummification, their fires, their architecture, if they met a hunter-gatherer tribe from Africa, the Africans would see them as gods.
Of course. We know
But
the Aztecs saw the Spanish as gods.
Yeah, the Aztecs are the... And so, again, much of what is there in ancient history could be explained by some civilizations are more advanced than others. Now, I'm not really going to go into the rabbit hole of... Because in archaeology, there is a lot of unexplained artifacts. And I mean, somebody somewhere... what scientists should be doing, we talked about conspiracy theory, we talked about hypotheses and a speculation on how to link certain things. Well, there are megalithic monuments all around the world that we don't know.
In the last 12 months, we found out there was pyramids all over the planet. Some of them in plain view, and people like yourself didn't even know there was one in the city where he comes from.
Well, the pyramid in Bosnia, I will actually personally visit that thing. I'm still suspending belief. I'll go there in June, July, and I'll shoot a video on the Bosnian pyramid.
But we're finding them in Indonesia. We're finding them now in Antarctica. They're starting to come out in Antarctica. Like these, there was one. I'm just trying to think of where this one is. Some guy's digging it up, and they're finding that it's exerting some sort of, I don't know, it's not AC, DC, or static electricity. There's some form of energy coming off it. And his theory, conspiracy theory, he believes that it's some sort of energy not generating machine.
Well,
and that's why these things have been built all around the planet.
Again, I don't, in my personal...
Hey, it's just a theory.
From me trying to integrate all the facts into some type of my theory doesn't include aliens, but it does include the possibility that in ancient history, we're talking, pre-Egyptian times, it's entirely possible that there is a lot of evidence for the Great Flood, this Diluvian Age, with the Ice Age's Great Flood, that human beings could have gotten pretty far, could have figured out ways of generating energy, electricity, electromagnetism that we today don't know.
The Germans were working on that bell.
The flying bell. I mean, that was their flying saucer.
No, it was still that they were before the saucer. They found huge amounts of radiation. I can't remember the experiment they were trying to pull off. The building's still there today.
Okay.
They were trying to. No, look, it's out of my depth because it's not my thing. But they were working on an energy device, and that energy device was revolved around their flying technology. But it was also an energy device, and I don't know what type of energy it was producing.
I mean, I looked into the work of guys like Graham.
Oh, sorry, but the Germans were also looking at a lot of ancient technology too. I know you've all probably seen Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
The Germans were running around the world.
Looking for ancient artifacts.
That's why they spent a lot of time down in Antarctica. They were looking for ancient civilizations and their technology.
I mean, and I'd hardly like to call the Germans, they were into something that we don't know. They believed a bunch of ridiculous shit. They made up their own Teutonic Knights history, mysticism, and the whole Madame Blavatsky and those secret societies, blah, blah, blah. But the overall picture is this. There are many issues in the world where we don't know the absolute truth. We have segments. We have a lot of dots that need connecting.
But that's what we do. But isn't that what we do?
Yeah, and anybody trying to connect those dots. And this is if scientists are trying to frickin' cure some virus, and they're going, I think that it works via this mechanism. They don't call the guy, you're not a conspiracy theorist, you don't have all the evidence. No. They go let's do an experiment and see if he's right.
That's right.
They actually they come up with a theory and they constructively try to either prove or disprove it.
But do you think conspiracy theory comes from people who like to use it as a bin to throw because they're ill-informed or uninformed?
Well, Chris, funny you should say that. Talking about a conspiracy theory, the word conspiracy theory as a bin there is a CIA memorandum 1035-960 where, they have assets in the media. So it's not necessarily an agent. It's just like some dude for example...
Paid by...
Yeah. Getting part of his salary, just going, listen, when we send you this, you publish this, or when we tell you to not publish something, publish shit. Literally, the memorandum says use the word straight after Kennedy died. Make sure you use the word conspiracy theorist to describe anybody questioning the government story of the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah, but that's very funny. You should say that.
And it's an official document, and they've actually gotten that released. And then, at the time, they were trying to load this term to the whole Elvis... Alien,
Little green
hat.
Man, tinfoil hat, yep.
And it was actually an organized CIA thing.
It's conditioning.
To condition you when you see this.
And that's like we get back to before. When you see anything on the news where someone says, I saw I've spoken to aliens. Like, whether it's true or not, I don't know. But what I'm saying is, as soon as he says that, you get people just looking at one another laughing. I mean, because they've been conditioned to go, as soon as you say that topic, or you say conspiracy theory, straight away that links to little green men from Mars.
And here's the, I think this is a good way to conclude this. And this is the ultimate, I guess, truth of the matter is, if you don't engage in conspiracy theory, if you do not look at events where the information is imperfect and try to connect the dots, you are never, ever going to have anything resembling an understanding of what is going on in the world. You are never going to have a chance in hell of changing in any constructive or positive way how the dominant institutions function. Because it all starts with looking at what you can find, forming a hypothesis, and working from there. It is a natural process of inquiry, of finding out the truth. And yet there is this term conspiracy theory that as soon as somebody makes that first speculative step into investigating the reality of events, of things, of phenomena, they're labeled a nutter, and it stops so many people.
Yeah, but the funny thing too is that the person who labels it and puts it in that box there, the person who labels it will never even look at the evidence. Will just turn away and go, I'm not even gonna go do any investigation. I'm not gonna look it up. And you know what? What you've just said. Let's say it's a government conspiracy. Let's say the fluoride conspiracy, right? That's a good one, right? Let's just say, I don't want to hear that. Because I don't want to hear bad news makes me feel bad. I only want to hear nice things. Or if we talk about sport. I mean, you know how many people I run into out there that go, I don't want to hear that because that's bad news and it makes me think about I don't want to think about bad stuff.
Yep.
And then, you know what? When a train runs them over, well, I'm not kidding. You can tell them the train's coming, I don't want to hear that. It's, But, when the train hits them, they're the ones sitting there going, what just happened? I got no idea. Yeah. Did I really get hit by a train?
I think another, I thought the way to reach people isn't to just tell them the facts, because, people...
It's got to revolve around sport, I find.
Well, it's got to revolve around something they already believe. And I just... I heard this random program of some Jamaican dude talking about, how the Bible is inaccurate and wrong. And
is it?
No, wait a second.
No,
Here's no. But here's the interesting thing. He didn't at all go into what I would normally do. Here's the historical evidence to say that this author and this guy and all these disciples did not live at the same time as Jesus, or that there is no record of this guy ever existing. None of that. He just goes straight into the story that everybody believes and say, okay, if God is all-knowing and he knows the future, why does he put the tree of knowledge there? And if he's so good and he loves Adam and Eve so much, it's kind of like if a friend gives you his apartment for the month and says, well, do anything you want, but don't touch this thing, the beautiful, colorful, shiny thing that I put in the middle of an apartment. Well, if it was nice, he'd actually put it away if you shouldn't touch it. And he's like, and And then if he regrets making humanity, how can he regret making humanity if he's all powerful, all knowing, and knew what would happen anyway?
I love the way some people think about things.
But you see, here's the thing. Like, here's the point. He didn't go, this is not factually accurate at all. He understood what people believe. He bought into their illusion, and through their illusion, he kind of showed them some contradictions within it. Mm. And I think the way to reach people is literally, so you explain to me what you think is going on.
They can't.
And when they can't...
They can't.
Well...
If you have no facts, how can you explain anything?
Well, just ask them some questions. Why do you think this is? And he's like, oh, I don't know. Like, well, don't you think it's a kind of important thing to know? And even if the conversation ends there, if they just go home thinking, like, man, I really should understand how this, like, money system works, or, like, even if they go home with a question in their head, that is a relevant one.
No, that'd be fantastic. But you know what? I've seen so many videos of guys going, I saw one just the other week, right? I had to laugh my head off. Do you think, this was the interview guy, right? Do you think if they fixed up gun control, President Kennedy wouldn't have shot the Pope in the head? And the guy goes, no, I think guns, it's a big culture in the US, and he didn't even think about the question that, and I'm thinking there's people out there that just, look, man, I don't care about that. I
think there was one of the guys said Lee Harvey Oswald would have shot Jesus.
Yeah, that's right. Lee Harvey Oswald would have shot Jesus if the gun control in the US. This is right now. This is not back in the 60s. And this guy, I know, he heard the question. Ooh. He just had to have an opinion, had to make a statement based on nothing. Yeah. And then you got another guy who goes, look, man, I just go to the beach and I hang out with my friends. I'm not interested. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
He was also asking him, like, when was Jesus shot? And he's like, 1600s? Yeah, he was...
1500? 600? AC or BC?
But, look, I don't know. That's just kind of funny.
AD,
and some people aren't.
AD.
Some people aren't very bright, and that's okay too. I just know I'm not rather than. I mean, we talked about this, and if people are interested, we've mentioned a bunch of like sort of conspiracy fact ideas. But if people are listening to us, going, "You guys are right," and I want to talk to my friends, parents, etc., understand what they believe, and start from what they believe, and gently from that point. Just
give them something to think about.
Point out let them ask themselves some questions and point out a few contradictions. Just like the guy that was saying that the Bible is wrong without referring to any facts, purely just on the logical inconsistencies within the story. Because if you believe the story, absolutely, just like people believe that we live in a democracy, people believe that it's a free country, people believe that their politicians have their best interests at heart, well, let's run with that. Well, if these guys are our best interests at heart, why are they failing so miserably? And maybe when they ask themselves that question, well, why are they failing so miserably? Maybe they can go somewhere from there. But if you just start off by saying, well, they're all colluding with these guys, and see, it started in 1967 with this server, and this,
people aren't interested.
People get overwhelmed, and they just, they shut down at that point. So I would say don't throw too many facts at people. Understand where they're coming from, and gently, just work out what the next step is. And that's how you kind of, lead people to...
But the biggest thing you get from most people is, what can you do? What can you do about it? And you'll see on our board, in our next podcast, you'll see we've already done this, the biggest idea of 2013, right? You might have already seen that. And it's to do with the petrol price. And a lot of people are going to, we're going to draw it up, we're going to go through the whole lot again, we're going to do it a little bit different. But a lot of people are going to say to us, but if you do this, that, and that, they'll do this, this, and that. Well, we've got about 5 videos we can make on this. So every time they look like they're going to change the way they do their business, we have a counter.
All right.
We have a counter way to counter that.
So I would say, Chris, in the near future, we're going to shoot a bunch of shorter videos for solutions. And I mean, I have an idea. You have your thing about petrol. And, today was going to be a podcast. We're going to get our friend, Dan, we're going to talk about global warming. And that is going to be, it will happen within the next 6 weeks for sure. And it's a very interesting topic. I don't want to go into in-depth discussion, but in my view, it's unfortunately, it's an enigma that...
I think it's something that has to be discussed.
What I was going to say is, it's worth asking the question. We can't always go into, is the science certain? Well, the science isn't settled or certain, and it will never be. That's like a very ugly, unfortunate fact. But I want to go and say, well, let's assume that really what they're saying is true. And it's not a bad assumption to make. I mean, the majority of scientists believe that. Now, personally, I think there's a good chance that they're wrong, but, let's assume that they're right. Assuming that they're right. In the next month, I will have it'll be called a solution to global warming idea on the board, and we're going to have the idea on how to provide everybody with lower petrol prices. That's coming up.
Well, you know, no matter what we do, we can here criticize anything we want because, we're not going to be held up to it. We are going to get a few comments, no doubt. But, if we provide solutions, you know what's going to happen? We're going to get a whole heap of comments. People are going to say, you can't do that, or you can't do this, or that's stupid. Well, you know what? We're trying. We're going to have a go at it. We're going to lay down what we think is a great idea and a way we can move forward. Because all these people, whether they be on radio or TV, they never, even like the Alex Joneses, they never offer solutions, right? They're always always easy to talk about the problems and all the fear and all the bullshit, but they will not offer a solution. So that's what we're going to try and do. Now, if you don't like what we're doing, comment, right? Tell us what you think. And better still, if you're in Melbourne, come on to our show.
Yeah, come up with your own idea that's going to work better.
That's right.
I think we can call it a day here. Hopefully the audio has held up. We are using pretty much a brand new computer. So that's it for today. From us, Sonny and Chris, we love you all very much, and participate, comment,
please comment, please subscribe,
and that's that.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world, using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the Budget Analyst Office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her. And her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about...
His head could be seen to move violently forward.
And...
They took the babies out of the incubators.
And...
Mobile production facilities.
And...
The rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit, paranoid, tinfoil, dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, MSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.